This video is going to be about a shoe that I think could have been the daily trainer of the year. It doesn't mean it's not a fantastic shoe, but there are some features in the shoe that I think stop it from being the best option for a daily trainer. This is the Asics Novablast 3. In this video, I'm going to be breaking it down. It's going to be really hard for me in this video to not compare the Novablast 3 to the Novablast 2. I also think it's a kind of important comparison, especially considering when the Novablast 2 is still available at a pretty heavily discounted price. The Novablast 3 is a worthy upgrade that is worth considering over a more discounted Novablast 2. It just depends what you're after, and we're going to get to that in a second. Before we get to the comparison between the Novablast 3 and the Novablast 2 and my overall thoughts, let's look at some of the stats in the shoe itself. It has a jacquard mesh upper that is sitting on top of a Flight Foam Blast plus midsole. There is a 31mm stack in the heel, a 22mm stack in the forefoot, giving the shoe an 8mm drop. A US men's size 9 comes in at 253 grams or 8.9 ounces if you use that measurement. And I think that is like probably the standout feature of the Novablast 3. If you compare these stats to the Novablast 2, it is very similar in the upper and the bottom half's setup, but the overall shoe has dropped in weight. A US men's size 9 in the Novablast 2 comes in at 275 grams or 9.7 ounces, which represents a 20-ish gram weight loss over the previous version. I actually weighed my US men's 13 Novablast 3 against my US men's 13 Novablast 2, and the weight saving was closer to 40 grams, which is huge for a daily trainer. As a point of reference, it's not quite as light as something like a Hoka Rincon 3. It's a little bit lighter than a Pegasus 39, and that's great because you're getting a lot more shoe in the Novablast 3 than you are in the Pegasus 39, and it is nearly 60 grams lighter than another New Balance option, the 880 V12. They are all different shoes, and the one feature that I will talk about, I think that separates this from the other shoes, is probably going to be durability. What is the same in the Novablast 3 compared to the Novablast 2 is, I think, the aesthetics. It's very similar to the Novablast 2 in looks, as well as the Novablast 1 for that matter. It still has a jacquard mesh upper, although the upper in the Novablast 3 is made from 75% recycled materials, which I think is awesome. It's great to see more shoes using more sustainable material in the upper. The upper feels a little bit lighter as well, especially around the toe box area or the front half of the shoe. It doesn't necessarily feel like the upper would be less durable than what was in the Novablast 2, but it does feel a touch different. The other similarity between the Novablast 3 and the Novablast 2 is in the midsole stack. They both have an 8mm drop, except the Novablast 2 is a mil lower at the back and the front, but I don't think that really impacts the running dynamics or changes any way that the shoe would feel. And this is where it gets really surprising with the Novablast 3. While the aesthetics look really similar, there's actually more that's different about the Novablast 3 than there is that is similar. The tongue has a new design, and what's interesting again about the tongue is that it's actually dropped the padding and gone for a different wing design. It's actually a change I think is pretty welcome. I really like the stretchy tongue that they've got on the Novablast 3. It's similar in its feel to something like the Nimbus 24, and it has more coverage over the foot. I think Asics call it a winged type of design. There's also a couple of minor changes around the heel of the shoe's upper. There is a smaller overlay for heel stability compared to what was in the Novablast 2, and there is no pull tab at the back either. I don't think either of those things have any impact on the shoe's feeling overall. I still think that with the Novablast 3, you're able to get a really great lockdown that is nicely padded around the back and feels good on feet. The bottom half of the shoe has had what I would say a major overhaul from the Novablast 2. And aesthetically, it does look the same, but if you do look closer, the etching and the patterns in the midsole are different, and it uses Flight Foam Blast Plus as opposed to the Flight Foam Blast in the Novablast 2. The Flight Foam Blast Plus is a compound that feels very similar to Flight Foam Blast, but it's just lighter. As far as how Flight Foam Blast Plus compares to regular Flight Foam Blast, I think it's very similar, which is great because Flight Foam Blast is an excellent compound that balances a nice cushioned ride with some bouncy responsiveness. The change in the Novablast 3 that I think, from my perspective at least, is the least welcomed are the changes to the outsole. The outsole pattern in the Novablast 3 is similar to the Novablast 2, which is different to the original Novablast, but it's not the pattern that I have an issue with. Asics use AHA rubber in the Novablast 3, which is the same as what they used in the first Novablast and the second Novablast, but it doesn't look like it is as durable as the Novablast 2. What's interesting is I actually compared my pair of Novablast 3s against my pair of Novablast 2s. And with this pair of Novablast, there is a little over 20 Ks in them, and my Novablast 2s have over 100 Ks. They look like they're very similar as far as wear goes. In fact, I think the Novablast 3s look almost more worn than what the Novablast 2s do, which is a big issue because the Novablast 3 is a daily trainer. A daily trainer is that sort of shoe that you reach for day in, day out. It is the workhorse of your running shoe rotation. And I think the changes to the outsole compromise how long the shoe will be useful for. On my runs, I haven't had an issue with grip, but I just wonder how it would go the more and more you use it. And if it looks like this after 20 Ks, I'm left wondering what it would look like after 50 or 100 Ks. That's why I kind of compared the weight of the Novablast 3 against something like a Rincon 3. While some would argue that they are different running shoes, and to some extent they are, the Rincon 3 is a lightweight shoe, it still has the same amount of cushion as Hoka's daily trainer, the Clifton. The outsole is less durable, but then that's also comparable to what I'm finding with the outsole of the Novablast 3. And so while I don't think it is probably the daily trainer of the year, I think it is an excellent running shoe. It just probably needs to be monitored closely as far as how the outsole fares, because once the outsole goes, it's really going to limit its usefulness. Well, you can't really use it if you start to slip all over the place, right? Anyway, I really want to know what you guys think of the Novablast 3, how you think it compares to the Novablast 2, if you've ran in both or are running in both, which one you prefer. Let me know in the comments below, but until the next video, laters.